Hello, my name is Medrick Rodriguez, and this is a message from Med. Last week, we began a study on the books of Samuel and discussed the first chapter. Through Elkanah, we learned that worship must begin at the household level because if we serve God faithfully with our family, we are less likely to stray away due to false teachings. Through Hannah, we learned the importance of seeking God during hard times. Her faith in God and commitment to Him allowed her to receive God's full blessing, as we will see in today's lesson based on 1 Samuel chapter 2. As a preface to this lesson, we will review the responsibilities of a priest according to the law given to Moses from God when the people of Israel were liberated from Egypt and headed to the Promised Land. First and foremost, the priest was to be faithful to God. There were many rules the priest followed in order to be holy or separated from sin because they were an extension of God on earth, representing His majesty, dignity, glory, and beauty. By maintaining this level of holiness, their intercession or prayers for the people of Israel would be heard by God. This brings up their second role. The priests were responsible for performing the sacrificial rituals required to receive God's forgiveness. They would receive the offerings given by the people, which included flock animals and unleavened baked goods. As part of these rituals, the priest would also lead the nation in prayer and continually pray for the nation. In this chapter, we will determine whether or not the current priests were fulfilling their sacred duties. As I did last week, I will read a few verses and then give an explanation and context. At the end of the chapter, I will state lessons we can learn from the text. And Hannah prayed and said, "My heart exults in the Lord, my mouth derides my enemies, because I rejoice in your salvation. There is none holy like the Lord, for there is none besides you. There is no rock like our God." This is a continuation of the first chapter. Hannah had just brought Samuel to be dedicated to serve in the temple all the days of his life. And this is the song and prayer that she offers to God at this moment. So we see here that she is exalting God. Her horn is exalted in the Lord. So that's a signal of strength in the Lord. And she says here that her mouth derides enemies because she's able to rejoice in God's salvation. Then she says, "There's none holy like the Lord, none beside you, no rock like our God." So we see this repetition of her saying that there is no one else like God. "Talk no more so very proudly, let not arrogance come from your mouth. For the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by Him actions are weighed." So here Anna says, talk no more so very proudly. Sometimes we are always quick to speak, but don't always follow what we say by good actions. This is why she says, "For the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by Him actions are weighed." So it's better to walk the walk than to talk the talk. "The bows of the mighty are broken, but the feeble bind on strength. Those who were full have hired themselves out for bread, but those who were hungry have ceased to hunger. The barren has borne 7, but she who has many children is forlorn. The Lord kills and brings to life. He brings down to Sheol and raises up. The Lord makes poor and makes rich. He brings low and He exalts. He raises up the poor from the dust. He lifts the needy from the ash heap. He makes them sit with princes and inherit a seat of honor." Hannah here starts to do a comparison. Those who are low, God brings up. Those who are high, God may bring down. So we here can learn that it's important to maintain a state of humility, because if we get too proud, God may bring us down. "For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and on them He has set the world. He will guard the feet of His faithful ones, but the wicked shall be cut off in darkness. For not by might shall a man prevail. The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken to pieces. Against them He will thunder in heaven. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to His king and exalt the horn of His anointed." So Hannah continues this acknowledgement that God is the one in control, and He is the one that's going to bring those in need up, just like he brought her up. She says that the pillars of the earth are the Lord. So he is in control of everything. And he will always protect those that are in need and faithful and turn away those who are not. This last part is important because she refers to God giving strength to a king. At this point, Israel didn't have a king, so she was prophesying about the future, not just of kings like Saul and David, but the King of Kings, which is Jesus. Because she also says, and exalt the horn of his anointed. This is the first time that that term anointed or Messiah was used in the Bible. And we see that this is a seminal prayer because people like Zechariah, who was the father of John the Baptist, and Mary quoted this prayer in their own prayers, which can be found in the New Testament. Then Elkanah went home to Ramah, and the boy was ministering to the Lord in the presence of Eli the priest. So simple enough, Elkanah and his family returned, except for Samuel, who stayed in the tabernacle. And he was ministering to the Lord. So in one certain translation, the Living Bible translation says, the child became the Lord's helper. So never underestimate your ability to serve God, regardless of your age or ability. Now the sons of Eli were worthless men. They did not know the Lord. This is something very important because just because you have been in church a long time or your parents are Christian doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to turn out a good Christian if you're not putting in the time in your daily devotional. So it's very important that each one of us take time to pick up our cross every day and follow Jesus. The custom of the priest with the people was that when any man offered sacrifice, the priest's servant would come while the meat was boiling with a three-pronged fork in his hand, and he would thrust it into the pan or kettle or cauldron or pot. All that the fork brought up, the priest would take for himself. This is what they did at Shiloh to all the Israelites who came there. Moreover, before the fat was burned, the priest's servant would come and say to the man who was sacrificing, "Give meat for the priest to roast, for he will not accept boiled meat from you, but only raw." And if the man said to him, "Let them burn the fat first, and then take as much as you wish," he would say, "No, you must give it now, and if not, I will take it by force." Thus, the sin of the young man was very great in the sight of the Lord, for the man treated the offering of the Lord with contempt. This part of the passage begins to talk about the sins of the sons of Eli. As stated earlier, whenever the people of Israel left Egypt and before they went into the promised land, God gave them the law through Moses, the Ten Commandments in addition to certain other laws. One of these laws was how the sacrifices would be offered to God. First and foremost, the fat would be burned off, or in this case, boiled off. Why? Because the fat was considered to be the most luxurious, best part of the animal, as we probably have all experienced at some point. So they would give the fat to God because the idea was that God would get the best part. And not only the best part, but he would get it first. And then the priests would get their part, and then the people would get their part. And that's how it worked. For whatever reason, we don't know, the priests, Hophni and Phinehas, didn't want the people to boil the meat first. And this caused a lot of trouble because people were trying to offer the sacrifices correctly, but the priests did not let them. And it got to the point where the people treated the offering of the Lord with contempt. In other words, they did not want to offer their sacrifices anymore because they felt like the priests were not doing it correctly and not honoring God correctly. Samuel was ministering before the Lord, a boy clothed with a linen ephod. And his mother used to make for him a little robe and take it to him each year when she went up with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice. Then Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife and say, "May the Lord give you children by this woman for the petition she asked of the Lord." So then they would return to their home. Indeed, the Lord visited Hannah, and she conceived and bore 3 sons and 2 daughters. And the boy Samuel grew in the presence of the Lord. Here we begin to see a contrast between Eli's sons, Ophni and Phinehas, and then Samuel. So we just learned about Ophni and Phinehas, how they perverted the sacrifices that were supposed to be given to God and became selfish. On the contrary, we see how Samuel was a boy clothed with a linen ephod, which represents that he is a servant of God. And we see again that every year Hannah and Elkanah go visit him every year, and every year she takes a robe for him. And in addition to that, we see God's faithfulness. Hannah was faithful to God. She said, if you give me a son, I will give him back to you, and he will serve you the rest of his life at your tabernacle. God, in turn, he gives her Samuel, but in addition, he gives her 3 sons and 2 daughters. Now, Eli was very old, and he kept hearing all that his sons were doing to all Israel, and how they lay with the women who were serving at the entrance to the tent of the meeting. So in the first part, we learn how Hophni and Phinehas were turning the people away from God by not allowing them to properly offer their sacrifices. In this part, we see how, in addition to that, Hophni and Phinehas were turning the workers of God, the other Levites, by committing sexual immorality with the women who came to worship. So these were probably women that came to serve at the tabernacle, who went there to work, but then these men would also commit these sexually immoral acts with them, further turning away the people from God. And he said to them, why do you do such things? For I hear of your evil dealings from all these people. No, my sons, it is no good report that I hear the people of the Lord spreading abroad. If someone sins against a man, God will mediate for him. But if someone sins against the Lord, who can intercede for him? But they would not listen to the voice of their father, for it was the will of the Lord to put them to death. Now the boy Samuel continued to grow both in stature and in favor with the Lord, and also with man. In this passage, we see that Eli is trying to talk to his son to tell him what is going on. You need to stop this. However, it seems like he is just now trying to fix his situation instead of starting from when they were young. And we see the result that despite his pleas, they did not listen to the voice of their father. We also see that it says, for it was the will of the Lord to put them to death. This doesn't mean necessarily that God wanted to kill them, but it shows that they had no intention of repenting. And then we see how Samuel is a contrast, because he grows in stature and in favor with the Lord, but also with the people. So the people see that Samuel is righteous, unlike Hophni and Phinehas. And there came a man of God to Eli and said to him, thus says the Lord, did I indeed reveal myself to the house of your father when they were in Egypt, subject to the house of Pharaoh? Did I choose him out of all the tribes of Israel to be my priest, to go up to my altar, to burn incense, to wear an ephod before me? I gave to the house of your father all my offerings by fire from the people of Israel. Why then do you scorn my sacrifices and my offerings that I commanded for my dwelling, and honor your sons above me by fattening yourselves on the choicest parts of every offering of my people Israel? Therefore the Lord, the God of Israel, declares, I promised that your house and the house of your father should go in and out before me forever. But now the Lord declares, far be it from me, for those who honor me I will honor, and those who despise me shall be lightly esteemed. Behold, the days are coming when I will cut off your strength and the strength of your father's house, so that there will not be an old man in your house. Then in distress you will look with envious eye on all the prosperity that shall be bestowed on Israel, and there shall not be an old man in your house forever. The only one of you whom I shall not cut off from my altar shall be spared to weep his eyes out, to grieve his heart, and all the descendants of your house shall die by the sword of men. In this part, a man of God goes and confronts Eli regarding his and his son's sins. Remember, Eli was the high priest, so even though his sons were committing the big sins, it was his responsibility to set things right, both as a father and as their boss. And we see the judgment that God hands down. They were supposed to be servants of God as priests, but this sin resulted in their punishment that they would not be able to serve anymore. God said, I would cut off all your descendants so they wouldn't be priests anymore, because I cannot honor those who not honor me. In addition, he says, none of your descendants will live to be old age, and those who do will just be miserable. So their end would be a painful one. And this that shall come upon your two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, shall be the sign to you. Both of them shall die on the same day. And I will raise up for myself a faithful priest, who shall do according to what is in my heart and in my mind. And I will build him a sure house, and he shall go in and out before my anointed forever. And everyone who is left in your house shall come to implore him for a piece of silver or a loaf of bread, and shall say, please put me in one of your priest's places, that I may eat a morsel of bread. So we see this very fateful sentence here, that both of his sons, Hophni and Phinehas, would die on the same day. So perhaps Eli wasn't going to see how his descendants wouldn't be priests anymore, but he would at least have this one sign that his sons would die on the same day. And he additionally says here, I will raise myself a faithful priest. So this is kind of a three-part promise. So first we see Samuel, who God was bringing up to take his place. Later we would see the high priest that would replace Eli's family. And then finally, this also refers to Jesus, who is the high priest. In this lesson, we see God's faithfulness for better and for worse. Hannah was faithful to God, and we see how God blesses her with Samuel. She praises God in the good times and the bad times. As a result, God not only gives her Samuel, he ultimately gives her 3 sons and 2 daughters. Eli may have been a good priest in his younger days, but as he grew older, he failed to teach his sons, Hophni and Phinehas, how to serve properly as priests. He did not seem to command respect from them and lacked the courage to put an end to their sacrilegious acts. Hophni and Phinehas had no respect for God or men, namely Eli. They did not follow the commandments given to them to the extent that the other Israelites did not want to continue to submit their offerings to God. The actions of these men resulted in the end of their service as priests and a total downfall to their family for generations. Samuel did not allow those around him to affect his integrity. He could have followed in the steps of Hophni and Phinehas, but instead Samuel grew in the presence of the Lord. This allowed him to gain favor with the Lord and also with man. His faithfulness will allow him to lead Israel under God's guidance during an upcoming time of crisis, as we will see in future lessons. How can we apply these lessons to our life? This lesson is entitled Fulfilling Our Priestly Responsibilities. Now, before you say, not it, I'm not a priest, hear me out. In his first letter to the church, Peter states that we are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. As Christians, we are commissioned by Jesus Christ to make disciples of all nations, teaching them to observe all his commandments. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. We can choose to be faithful like Samuel, or we can choose to not only endanger our spiritual lives, but the spiritual well-being of our loved ones. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoy the video. Do not forget to subscribe and like. Have a nice day.